want to warn you that I'm not much of a writer. I'm a stay-at-home mother, and I've been wanting to write my experiences to you for a while now. All three of the kids are in school, and it's wintertime on our farm when everything slows down, and I'm thrilled to be sharing this with you finally, and please again forgive my inability to write. I'm just going to stop here. I haven't done anything to the story. I'm reading it straight off her email, and to the writer, you did a great job on this. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with it. I live in Bozeman, Montana. I've had 2 encounters with something. The first one was when I lived in Pony, Montana. It's a tiny town tucked into the mountains. Around 2012, my friend and I were in the mountains above Pony, Montana, and there's a hot spring up there that a good friend of mine was a caretaker for. The owners were a rich couple that were never there, and especially in the harsh winters. Being Montana girls, we were never afraid to grab some beer and throw the car in 4-wheel drive and sneak up to these hot springs. The pools were tucked into a ravine that was surrounded by steep mountains and large rocks. It really was a beautiful and peaceful place. There was a gate and there was a key, and we had access to it thanks to our friend. We probably abused our privileges, but either way we had fun, and time moves on. Young single girls that knew we would rather ask for forgiveness than for permission. This pool was about the size of an average swimming pool, and above that was a smaller pool and a wood stove sauna. We would often sit in the sauna. You had to start a fire in the stove and pour water over the rocks that sat on top of it. Well, this created the heat, and it was our little heaven. This had been the 100th time that we had been up there. We always had plenty of our favorite beer and music with us. After we sat in the sauna, we jumped in the pool. This was around 11 p.m. We swam to the far end and talked about whatever girls talk about. We were drinking our beer, and after about 10 minutes, both of us instantly had this eerie feeling that something was watching us. We've had this feeling before, but not quite this strong. There was a mountain lion known to be in the area, so before we had this eerie feeling, we always thought it was a mountain lion. We always carried a gun, and we knew not to have food and to beware of our surroundings. But this was different. This was almost gut-wrenching. It was just the 2 of us girls. I was in my mid-20s, and my friend was a few years older, and we skinny dipped in this pool. We heard what sounded like a rock thrown from the mountain, and it hit the dirt outside of the pool, and it kind of rolled a little bit toward us, almost like someone had thrown it from the top of the mountain. My friend asked me, "Do you think that's Bill?" That's the name of the caretaker. I said, "How would he have gotten up there on that incline?" Knowing Bill, he would have made his presence known. We sat there in silence with this eerie feeling. The chills I felt in that hot pool were almost painful, and every fiber of my being was telling me to go as fast as we could go and get out of there. When I turned to my friend, her face was white, and I said, "Something does not want us here tonight, and I think we need to leave." Our clothes and towels were at the other end of the pool, and we swam 6 or 7 feet over to our stuff. To get to our car on the trail down to the main road, we had to walk or run about 800 feet, but we made it to the car. We did not forget our beer. Even inside the car, we felt this empty, almost evil feeling or some kind of presence. It's hard to explain, and I'm sorry if I'm doing a terrible job at it. I imagine that others have had this and can relate to what I'm trying to explain. We drove about a mile to the lock gate. My friend was also scared, and she dropped the key in the snow. And I got out to help her, and we found it, and she drove out. And in her headlights, there were a pair of large footprints from the field to the fence of the right of the gate. I didn't follow them to see how far they went up, but there were no other cars or tracks, and it was far enough away from our footprints to distinguish that they were most definitely not ours. I locked the gate, and then I screamed at my friend, "Let's get out of here." And as we drove down, there were only one set of tire tracks, our tracks going in. We stayed up all night talking about it. It was unexplainable. and the feeling was something neither of us had felt before. And then I called my dad. He's a retired police officer, and he has followed the missing 411 Bigfoot stories for a long time, and he's also a huge fan of your podcast. Oh, cool. His explanation sparked my interest. Now, I've read that it is common to have a second encounter after you've had the first. That is according to some experts anyway. 10 years later, I was married now, and I had 3 beautiful children, and my husband and I are farmers in Bozeman. Alone time and date nights are far and few between. One night during the winter, we were able to have a kid-free night. We decided to go to dinner and drive up to a local lake for a little adventure. We knew the road would be sketchy with the snow, and it was windy, and the road up to the lake is surrounded by forest. We had to take his truck, and we barely made it in the snow. But we parked the truck by the lake once we made it and decided to sit on the tailgate facing the mountains. Again, we were the only car up there, and we did not see any other tracks before us, and certainly no one came up behind us. It was snowing, and it was pretty warm that night, so we bundled up and grabbed our drinks and talked on the tailgate. Just before I said to my husband that I was getting cold, that feeling of dread and terror came over me again. So much time had elapsed that I had forgotten about my friend and I's creepy experience, but when that feeling came over me again, it all came back. My husband looked at me and he asked, "What's going on with you?" Just then a rock came out of the darkness and it hit the ground about 3 feet in front of us, and it rolled to the passenger side of the truck. I looked up at my husband, and by the look on his face, I knew he had the same gut-wrenching feeling that I did. We got back in the pickup, and he asked what the hell was that. He explained that right before the rock hit the ground, he got an icky, sick feeling. I told him that I did too. He turned the truck around, and we shined our lights out toward the trees where the rock came from. There was not a soul, not a car, or anything to be seen. The tree line was a half a mile from us, and there was nothing in between us and it. On the way down the mountain, I told my husband about me and my friend at the hot springs, and we decided to tell my dad, and that is when he told us about your podcast. Even though I did not actually see something, I can relate to a lot of others and their stories. Deep down, I have always thought it was something like Bigfoot. From the fear of being deemed a crackpot, I have never let myself truly believe what I thought, and I've never told anyone. I think it's safe to say that I do believe now. Thank you for listening and reading my story. Her name is Samantha. And she says, "I do not mind if you use my name. I changed the name of the caretaker. I changed it to Bill." Okay. All right. Well, that was a great story. You know, we get a lot of these stories where people just have these unbelievable feelings of dread, of danger, something watching them, rocks hit the ground out of nowhere, all this kind of stuff. Who knows if that's a Bigfoot, but it could be something. I mean, you know, there's all kind of stuff going on at this, like places like the Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know. I mean, could it be an alien? I'm stupid. I don't know. I'm a moron. I don't put all these 2 and 2 together, and I'm not real studied in these topics, but it could be anything. I don't know. It couldn't be. What throws rocks? Where do rocks come from out of the middle of nowhere? Something has to throw them. So anyway, this was a great story. I got kind of creeped out reading it. So thanks, Samantha, for sending this, and you did a great job writing this. Very good job. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, there's no name on this email, but it is really good. I have always believed in all things supernatural and unexplainable in our strange world. Things like ghosts and aliens and wendigos, etc. I've seen things I couldn't even begin to explain, going back to as early as sharing my bunk bed in a room with my sister, and both of us experiencing and seeing and hearing unnatural things. This past May, I got married to my husband, Chad, and he's the one to blame for my unplanned binge dive into Bigfoot. It's not his fault, of course. I grew up hearing stories about Bigfoot from my very large family for years. I was always intrigued by what they were and if they were really out there in our Minnesotan woods, but it never really pulled my leg until now. What started all of this was because of a real Bigfoot encounter Chad told me that he had, and which he didn't tell me for a long time, and he predicted I wouldn't have believed him anyway. 10 years ago, it was late August, and Chad was a senior in high school. He had just turned 18, and he was enjoying his last summer weekend before school started up the following Monday. Him and his buddy were hanging out Friday night at his friend's parents' house. They started out the night playing video games and drinking soda and realizing that neither of them had eaten. They went upstairs and hopped in a friend's car and ran to the store. They decided to grab some steaks. Once they were back, they decided to grill them up outside on the deck in the backyard. The deck was 2 stories high, and the forestation behind the house was super thick and it was dense with trees. And there was roughly 10 yards from the house in each direction to the forest. It was totally surrounded. As soon as they lit up the grill for the steaks, they started hearing rustling noises coming out of the undergrowth in the tree line. Well, initially, they chalked it up to a deer or coyote or some other animal, and they continued grilling. They were used to the wild animals out in the woods. And then both Chad and his friend heard a loud double knock, like the sound of a cracking of a baseball bat against a tree. They both froze for a second, looking off straight into the woods where they heard the sound coming from, thinking, what the hell was that? Chad hollered out at it after a second, saying, well, knock, knock to you too, bud. Well, they both started laughing it off like it was nothing, and they forgot about it quickly, and then suddenly they heard the same double knock again. This time the sound was coming slightly from the right of the woods, and again the rustling under the bushes in the tree line started all over again. They finished their steaks. They were too on edge to enjoy them now, and they chucked their remaining T-bones to the left of the tree line, both of them flying past the clearing. And the rustling that they were hearing in front of them was now crashing loudly to the left toward those bones. They turned the propane off to the grill really fast and got the hell out of there, and they beelined it toward the house. His friend grabbed his car keys and says, man, let's get out of here. And they jumped into the car, and the tires peeled, not even looking back toward the house. Once they slowed up about a mile away from his friend's place, each of them pulled out a cigarette and popped in a Rush CD. I don't know why I think that's funny, but that's just kind of funny. They started off by listening to Tom Sawyer, because they both thought there was something relaxing about the music effects in that track. His friend was still driving, and they took a right down a dirt road toward the backwoods neighborhood. They reached a T in the road, and they took another right. The friend was only going about 20 miles an hour because he knew that deer were notorious on that road and people hit them all the time. Music was blasting, and they were singing back and forth to each other, and Chad looked out the windshield on a whim, and right in front of them, moving quickly to the left in 2 huge steps, he saw a damn Bigfoot cross the road. With eyes wide and in shock, his friend noticed Chad's face and asked him what was up, and he slowed down the car. Chad choked out the words, "It's a Bigfoot, man!" His friend replying loudly, "A Bigfoot?" Chad nodded rapidly, and his friend immediately whipped the car around, shouting, "Where?" They drove back about 100 feet, and Chad pointed to where he saw him cross the road. His friend pulled the headlights into the ditch toward the patch of broken matted weeds, and his headlights were pointing at a tree about 75 feet in front of them. This tree stood 25 or 30 feet tall, and there was a 2-way branch starting up at about 8 feet from the base. Chad was staring at the space in the split tree and realized he was looking at a gray-brown, reddish hair-covered chest. He slowly looked upward and he saw the face 4 feet above the split, and it was staring right back at him. Chad said that this thing looked very old and very sinister, and it was definitely not happy that some kids had spotted him mistakenly. Chad was terrified, and he realized he was holding his breath. And once the friend opened the car door, he tried to scream, "Get back in the car," but he only ended up choking his words out. He was too scared to talk. Before speaking English again, he looked back at the tree to see if the Bigfoot was still there, and he caught this beast breaking off a branch toward the top of the tree like it was a pretzel. The Bigfoot then hurled the branch clear over the car and immediately caught his friend's attention as it passed the other side of the ditch and landed with a loud crash in the field behind the car. Well, they looked at each other and they were freaking out, and Chad finally screamed, "Let's go!" The second he shouted that, the Bigfoot let out a deep, resonating, evil roar. Chad's friend froze in fear. The flight response catching up to him, he jumped into the car. Chad was already in there, and he slammed the car into reverse, pointing them to the right, and then slammed it into drive, and he took off fast, kicking up so much dirt and dust that they couldn't see the taillights. Neither of them said a word to each other the entire way back to his friend's house. They were trying to come to terms with what had just happened to them. Once they were back at the house, Chad asked his friend, along with using some choice words, "Can you believe that just happened?" "No, it didn't happen, because I refuse to believe it, and I don't want to be looked at as crazy," replied his friend. "Well, how can you say that?" said Chad. "You saw what happened. We don't have to tell anyone, but you can't ignore this." "Well, maybe you can't," his friend said, "but I can, and if you tell anyone I was involved, I will deny it until I'm dead." His friend finished the conversation and headed toward his dad's liquor cabinet. They weren't old enough to drink legally, but they both took a shot or two, not mentioning the encounter the rest of the night. I thought my husband was crazy when he told me this story. I didn't believe him at first, but I really thought about it, and I thought this is too detailed to be lied about. So one afternoon, a week after he told me this story, he brought me to where this had all gone down 10 years ago. It was a nice sunny day, and I figured we'd go on the adventure with our dog. I parked the car on the side of the dirt road. It was 75 feet from the tree where you could still see the break from the branch. And when I saw that, I got goosebumps all over my arms. We got out and started looking around, seeing if we could find any clues from his encounter or new footfalls in the area. I was trying to look for the huge branch this creature had broken off and thrown, but I couldn't find it. We did find what looked to be a trail of matted down grass leading to the tree from the dirt road. And on the opposite side of the road, the trail of matted down grass continued into the forest. On that side, we found a fresh break of a tree branch sticking straight up in the dirt, like someone had stuck it there very recently, sort of like a marker. Instantly, we both smelled something rancid. It was like death and sewage, and we covered our noses. We were standing completely still at this moment. We were 100 feet from that tree line. The sounds of the bugs and birds had completely stopped, and our dog was on guard. Her hair was standing straight up, and she was growling, and she was staring in the direction of those trees. We heard a couple of whistles coming from the left and the right, and then some more in front of us. Chad and I started walking backwards slowly, and our dog ran to the car and jumped in. And when we got there, she was shaking in fear. I still wasn't able to see anything, but the feeling of the fear creeped up on me, and we just kept walking slowly back to the car, not making any sudden moves. That was when I stopped dead in my tracks, because I realized I was now looking at a large reddish-brown figure in the tree line, and then I saw it crouch down and disappear once he had noticed that I noticed him. I held in a scream, my heart was pumping, and Chad and I booked it back to the car. We didn't peel out, we just drove slowly down the road, and I was looking out the window toward the tree line to see if I could see anything again, and I spotted a different but similar creature with darker hair, and it was significantly smaller. I pulled my phone out and took a picture, but this thing noticed me too soon and hid as soon as I snapped the photo. And then we drove away, and we haven't gone back there since. I believe my husband now 110%, and I have proof of my own that Bigfoot is out there. You can call us crazy, but I couldn't make this shit up. That's what I say about a lot of these stories. It's hard to make this stuff up. And then maybe that explains the blurry pictures. I don't know. I did some memes kind of poking fun at blurry pictures, but maybe Bigfoot knows that he's getting a picture taken of him and he moves real quick and like right about the time the shutter opens up, and that's why Bigfoot pictures are so blurry. I don't know. But this was great. This girl marries this guy. He tells her a Bigfoot story. She doesn't believe it. They go there. No, the event happened 10 years ago. I'm looking back through the email here. But 10 years, the tree's still there. The two-top is still there. The branch that got broken off is, let's see, they couldn't find it on the other side of the road. But the branch was broken off, and she took him to the exact tree with a fork in the tree trunk. That's interesting to me. And then, of course, she actually saw something there. I know I'm just reiterating the story, but I'm trying to make a point. It would be pretty cool to go back to a place that happened 10 years ago and show somebody. See that tree right there? See that branch broken off of it? That's what that Bigfoot broke off and threw at me, damn it. That's what I'm talking about. All right, this was a great story. I really appreciate the writer sending it. She did a great job writing it, and I loved it. Thank you. All right, this is a really good encounter. I think you guys will enjoy this. Let's see, the person, don't know anything about the name. Let's just get on with the story. She writes, I've had many experiences in my life that people have laughed at me for. I never let them bother me. I know what I'm about to tell you is the truth, and I'm not afraid to tell my story. You go, girl. When I was 14, we lived in a new housing tract in California called Diamond Bar. We had lived there since I was 11, and my best friend Nikki lived next door. During the summer, we used to sneak out of our houses at night and go exploring. I had a front bedroom and a balcony, so I would climb over the railing and cross the roof to the garage and then shimmy down the fence gate to the backyard. Nikki only had to sneak down her stairs. Once we were free, we would begin our adventures. That often meant that we would go to the community clubhouse that was over a mile away. Our favorite thing to do there was to put patio chairs in the pool and sit in them for a couple of hours before going home. It may not sound like much fun to you, but we were young, and the very idea of sneaking out was a big deal for us. One night, we were sitting there in the pool looking up at the sky when we noticed a light that seemed to be closer than it should be. We both thought it was strange. The neighborhood guard drove up at that moment, so we both dove under the water. When we came up for air, the guard had left and the light was gone. We decided it was time to head home, so we put away our chairs and we started the walk back. I noticed the light was back in the sky and it seemed to be following us. Well, we hurried home. And that night, I climbed the fence and crossed the roof and climbed back over the railing faster than I had ever done before. Once I was inside, I turned around to look for the light, and even though I had a view of the entire valley from my balcony, I didn't see it anywhere, so I just went to bed. The following spring, my parents went to Hawaii with my grandmother, and they left my older sister to watch me and my little sister. It was Good Friday, and I had walked to a girlfriend's house about a mile away for a party. Back then, I walked or rode my bike everywhere. Later, it was getting late, so I decided I'd better be getting home. And I reached the point where I had to turn onto our street, and I noticed a light in the sky again. There were a lot of clouds that night, but the light seemed to be moving through them. I wasn't afraid of it, I was just curious. Our neighborhood was surrounded by hills with a large cattle and horse ranch behind our house, and the hills went on for miles. Nikki and I loved to trespass onto the ranch and ride the horses bareback and chase the cattle. We were tomboys. When I got to our house, I started up the stairs and I noticed a light coming from under my sister's room. It was odd that she would be up so late. It was around midnight. Unlike my room that faced the front, hers faced the back and overlooked the ranch. I walked over and I opened the door. Her shears were pulled closed, but there was light coming through them, bouncing off her mirror and onto her face. My sister seemed to be in some kind of a trance. And I went over and I opened up the shears, and as I did so, the light pulled back and then shot straight up into the sky. She lay down and she slept then, and I tried to wake her up, but she would not wake up. The next morning at breakfast, I asked her what the light was in her room the night before, and she looked at me puzzled for a minute and then said, "What light?" I knew instantly that she had no memory of it. Over the years, she has told me of fairies visiting her in her room wherever she has lived. It was not until I was in my late 50s that I realized that she was an abductee. She has no memory of it, but they continue to visit her. I eventually brought it up again, but she insists that the fairies visit her. My sister is an artist who doesn't put deep thought into things like this, so I left it alone, because I didn't want to upset her, but I know what I saw. Oh, that's cool. Is it possible that something from, let's say, outer space, assuming it's from outer space, could be from under the ocean? I don't know where these aliens come from, but is it possible that they could visit people, abduct them, take them away, bring them back, and they never know what happened? Those stories kind of give me the creeps, but they really are fascinating. And there are a lot of documented stories like this. I just thought it was interesting. It's a great story. Thank you to the writer for sending it. Okay, there's a person who comments on my videos, and he's been asking, I think it's a he, has been asking over and over for a Dogman story, and I don't get many Dogman stories. I even did a search. I think there's about 2,500 emails in my inbox. Probably 2,000 of those are encounter stories people have sent to me. I did a search for Dogman, trying to find some Dogman stories, and this is the only one that popped up. So if you guys have had some kind of Dogman experience, send it to me. We need some of those for this channel because people enjoy them. But anyway, this person, I'm not going to give her name, but here's what she writes. This is a Dogman story, and it's pretty creepy. In mid-August of 2003, we lived in a small town in Wexford County, located in the northern lower half of Michigan. At the time, we had 8 grown ducks and a couple of dozen hens. We kept them in a well-built coop, but we lost a couple of hens and our rooster to weasels. Those weasels are nasty critters, and they're known for raiding hen houses. But when even more hens began to disappear, we decided that it wasn't just the weasels at work. We suspected that our neighbor, he was a cruel man that we didn't care for, may have been helping himself to our birds. And then one morning, my husband came in from feeding the hens before work, and he said, "Hey, did you say there was a trapper or a tracker that lives in Buckley?" "Yeah," I said. "Will you give him a call and see if he can come out here?" My husband answered in an abrupt tone that kind of scared me. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know what was wrong. What had he been seeing? "Just call him," he said, "and don't let the kids play in the backyard," was the only answer he gave me. That really frightened me. I got in touch with the tracker, and he came out a day or so later. By then, every duck we had was gone, as were over half of our hens. The tracker was an older fella in his late 60s who looked every inch of the part. It was obvious that he knew what he was doing. He walked over to the empty duck pen and studied the ground and then searched the area around the chicken coop with the same precision. Looking up, he gave me a weird look and he said, "You might want to send the kids inside." My children were 2 and 4 back then. My heart was beginning to jump out of my chest even before I demanded to know why. What the hell was he seeing? "Please," he answered with a gentle smile. "Send the kids into the house," he said. The tracker continued to search the turf around the coop for several more minutes before stopping and looking up. He focused on a tree that was a few feet from the coop and he said, "I thought so. Gotcha." My eyes traced upwards along the long trunk until I saw them. There were 4 huge claw marks that were slashed into the bark 20 feet above the ground. The tracker backed away and continued his search, this time expanding it to include the ground around the tree as well. A minute later, he called me over and he pointed to the largest footprint I had ever seen. "What made that?" I gasped. "Have your husband call me as soon as he can," was the man's only reply. When my husband got home that night, he made the call, and I could tell by watching his face that the things the tracker was saying on the other end were not good. There were a lot of, "Okay, yeah, are you sure? I understand." With each word, my stomach churned a little more. "All right, what's going on?" I asked when he finally hung up the phone. "My husband is part Native American," and he gave me a serious look and he answered, "Don't let the kids play in the backyard and don't be outside after dark. Do you hear me?" "Okay," I answered slowly, "but why?" "It's what I was thinking it was," he said. "I didn't want to say anything until I got confirmation from the tractor, and you may not believe this, but he thinks, and I do too, that we're dealing with a dog man, a really big dog man." "Well, how do you reply to that?" And I stood there staring at him for a minute, trying to wrap my mind around what my husband had just said, before I finally managed to say, "Are you serious?" "Yes," he said. My husband is not a BS kind of guy. Even if he were, no one would joke about something involving the safety of their own children. Well, I believed him, and for the next few nights, we slept in our front room. My husband kept a shotgun beside the bed, and from there we could see the chicken coop through the big window. On the third night, we were lying there half asleep when my husband quietly said, "Did you hear that?" "No," I answered honestly, but he was already up and loading the shotgun. "Get the big flashlight ready," he said, "and when I give the signal, shine it on the coop." I did as I was told, and I waited. And my husband went to the back door, and he looked at me, and he whispered, "Go!" I turned on the light and aimed it right at the coop, and as I did so, something huge jumped out from the side of it. It moved so quickly that I didn't see much more than the yellowish-red eye shine that was a good 9 feet above the ground. And I was also able to tell that it was standing on 2 legs. My husband was out the door as soon as the light came on. Now, he's a good shot, and I knew that he had hit it. I could see its dark shadow as it turned and leaped across the coop, and with one stride it vanished into the woods. A few seconds later, we heard a horrible sound that was somewhere between a shriek and an extremely powerful howl. We didn't have any more animals come up missing after that, but to be safe, we didn't let the kids play in the backyard. I thought we were done with that entire thing, and then in September, about a month later, my husband came home from work one night and he said, "I saw it again." My first thought was, "Oh my God, not again." He was on his way to work that morning, taking the back roads as he always did, when he saw something down in the ditch beside the road. He slowed down thinking it might be a deer or a bear that could jump out in the road, but it wasn't what it was. A massive creature rose up and crossed the road from one side to the other in 2 strides, and it looked straight at my husband. And then it was gone. He said it was at least 7 feet tall, and that it walked on 2 legs. And, he said, it had the face of a dog. Oh, man, can you imagine anything more horrifying than that? Do these things, I don't know much about dogmen, but are they known for attacking people? It's like, do they prey on people? It sounds like a werewolf to me, but I know there's a difference between dogmen and werewolf. Werewolves change from humans to wolves and back to humans, and dogmen are supposedly just dogmen. That's what I hear from everybody when I ask that question. But are they predators on humans? I don't know. Just seeing one of these things seems scary to me. It's a great story to the writer. I really appreciate you sending it. And again, that's my only Dogman story that I could find. There may be more in there, but if I do a search in Google that says Dogman, D-O-G-M-A-N, it should pop up in my search if that word is anywhere in the email. A few of them pop up, but they're not stories. They're something else. They're like, "Hey, look at this video of the Dogman," or whatever. Anyway, this is a great story. Thank you, ma'am, for sending it. Let's see, I think this podcast is scheduled to go out Thursday afternoon. And I've decided on the spur of the moment to go to Land Between the Lakes. The Sawdust Beast crew is having a meet and greet camp out this weekend. I was going to take my wife. I was going to hook up our travel trailer and go up there so she can meet everybody. But she just kind of wants to hang out here by herself. I think she wants to get rid of me, which is fine with me. I'm going to go up there by myself and just tent camp. So as you're listening to this, I'm probably setting up my tent right now. And if you live close to LBL, I don't know exactly the name of the campground. I know how to get there, but I don't know the name of it. Check the Sawdust Beast Facebook page. I'm sure they've talked about it on their Facebook page about where it is, when it is, and all. But I think it starts Friday morning. I'm just going a little early because my wife wants to get rid of me, and I'm going to oblige her. I'm out there at LBL with all the dog men and the boogers. All right, thank y'all for listening to this podcast, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.